They say that some people are meant to find each other, that destiny has a way of pulling souls together across time and distance. But what if destiny had been trying for 25 years? What if two children, separated by a single afternoon of tragedy and heroism, had been circling each other like planets in opposite orbits, waiting for gravity to finally bring them crashing together? On a rain-soaked Tuesday night in Seattle, when a father's worst nightmare became reality and a doctor's hands moved with impossible precision, the universe would finally collect on a debt that had been waiting since they were both 7 years old. The truth hiding in plain sight would shatter everything they thought they knew about coincidence, about fate, and about the day that changed both their lives forever. Because sometimes the person who saves your child is the same person whose life you saved when you were just children yourself, and neither of you remembers. Until you do. The fluorescent lights of Seattle Grace Hospital flickered overhead as Marcus Chen burst through the emergency room doors, his 7-year-old son Ethan limp in his arms. Rain dripped from both of them, leaving a trail across the white tile floor. Ethan's lips had taken on a bluish tint, and his breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. Marcus had never known terror like this, the kind that made his hands shake and his vision tunnel until all he could see was his son's pale face. "Please, somebody help. My son, he can't breathe." Marcus's voice cracked, raw with panic. A nurse appeared immediately, her eyes widening as she took in Ethan's condition. Within seconds, they were surrounded by a flurry of blue scrubs and urgent voices. Someone tried to take Ethan from his arms, but Marcus couldn't let go. His fingers had locked around his son's small body, as if his grip alone could keep the boy tethered to this world. "Sir, we need you to put him down so we can help him." The voice was calm, authoritative, and unmistakably feminine. Marcus looked up to see a woman in a white coat stepping forward, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes sharp with focused intensity. There was something about her presence that cut through his panic like a blade. "I'm Dr. Sarah Morrison. I'm going to take care of your son, but I need you to trust me and let him go." Something in her voice, in the steadiness of her gaze, made Marcus's arms unlock. He laid Ethan on the gurney, and immediately the team descended, wheeling him toward a trauma bay. Marcus tried to follow, but a hand caught his arm. He spun, ready to fight anyone who kept him from his son, but it was Dr. Morrison again. "You can't come back there right now. I need you to stay here and give the admitting nurse his information. Can you do that?" She didn't wait for his answer. "What happened? When did this start?" "We were at home having dinner. He started complaining his throat felt tight. I thought maybe it was an allergic reaction, but he's never been allergic to anything before. Then he just collapsed. I didn't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a chaotic rush. Dr. Morrison's eyes narrowed. "What did you have for dinner?" "Thai food. We ordered from that new place on 5th. He had the pad thai with peanuts." Marcus's stomach dropped as the word left his mouth. Oh, God, peanuts. He's never had peanuts before. "I didn't even think." "Anaphylactic shock," Dr. Morrison said, already moving. "Nurse Chen, get me an EpiPen stat. Prepare for possible intubation. This boy needs epinephrine now." She glanced back at Marcus. "We've got him. Stay here." Then she was gone, disappearing behind the double doors, and Marcus was left standing in the middle of the emergency room, soaked to the bone, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. The admitting nurse was asking him questions, name, date of birth, insurance information, but the words felt like they were coming from underwater. All he could think about was Ethan's blue lips, the way his small chest had barely moved with each breath. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Marcus paced the waiting room, his wet shoes squeaking against the floor, ignoring the curious looks from other people waiting for news of their loved ones. He pulled out his phone 3 times to call someone, anyone, but who would he call? His parents were in California. Ethan's mother, Jessica, had walked out on them 4 years ago, disappearing to find herself and never looking back. It was just the two of them now, just Marcus and Ethan against the world, and the thought that he might lose his son made him physically ill. Finally, the double doors swung open, and Dr. Morrison emerged. Her face was unreadable, and Marcus's knees went weak. He rushed forward, searching her expression for any hint of what she was about to say. "He's stable," she said, and Marcus actually gasped, the breath he'd been holding exploding from his lungs. "The epinephrine worked. His airways are open and he's breathing normally now. We're going to keep him overnight for observation, but he should make a full recovery." Marcus's legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, his head in his hands, and he realized he was crying. Great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He didn't care who saw. His son was alive. Ethan was going to be okay. A hand touched his shoulder, light and tentative. Dr. Morrison had crouched down beside him, her face now showing the compassion that her professional mask had hidden. "He's going to be fine, Mr. Chen. You got him here in time." "I almost didn't," Marcus choked out. "I almost killed my own son because I didn't know he was allergic to peanuts." What kind of father doesn't know something like that? The kind who just saved his son's life by recognizing something was wrong and getting him to the hospital, Dr. Morrison said firmly. "Allergies can develop at any age. There was no way for you to know. What matters is that you acted fast, and he's going to be okay." Marcus looked up at her, really looked at her for the first time. She had to be around his age, mid-30s, with warm brown eyes that seemed to see straight through him. There was a small scar above her left eyebrow, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Something about her felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for saving him." "That's my job," she said with a small smile. "Come on. Let's get you to your son. He's been asking for you." Ethan looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines, but his eyes were open and clear. When he saw Marcus, his face crumpled. "Dad?" Marcus was at his side in an instant, gathering him carefully into his arms. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. You scared me so bad." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, no, no." Marcus pulled back to look at his son's face, smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just had an allergic reaction. It's not your fault." Dr. Morrison stood in the doorway, watching them with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "He'll need to carry an EpiPen with him from now on," she said, "and you'll want to see an allergist to determine the full extent of his allergies. But for tonight, he just needs rest." "Can I stay with him?" Marcus asked. "Of course. I'll have a nurse bring you some blankets." She hesitated, then added, "I'll be checking on him throughout the night. If you need anything at all, have them page me." "Dr. Morrison," Marcus called as she turned to leave. She looked back. "Thank you. Really, you saved my son's life." Something flickered across her face, an emotion too quick to catch. "Sleep well, both of you." The night passed in fitful stretches. Marcus dozed in the chair beside Ethan's bed, jerking awake every time a monitor beeped or a nurse came to check vitals. True to her word, Dr. Morrison stopped by 3 times, each visit brief but thorough. On the third visit, around 4 in the morning, she found Marcus wide awake, watching Ethan sleep. "You should try to get some rest," she said quietly, checking Ethan's IV. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see him collapsing." Marcus rubbed his face. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd waited even 5 more minutes." Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down. It was unusual, unprofessional even, but the gesture felt natural. "But you didn't wait. You trusted your instincts, and you acted. That's what being a parent is about." "Are you a parent?" Marcus asked. She shook her head. No, never found the right person, I guess, or maybe never found the time. Medicine can be all-consuming. She looked at Ethan with something like wistfulness. But I've delivered enough babies and treated enough children to know what good parenting looks like. Your son is lucky to have you. His mother left us 4 years ago, Marcus said, surprising himself. He didn't usually talk about Jessica, especially not to strangers. But there was something about the quiet darkness of the hospital room, the intimacy of this shared vigil, that loosened his tongue. She said she couldn't handle being a mother, that it wasn't what she wanted. I came home one day, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. She just left. I'm sorry, Dr. Morrison said, and the sympathy in her voice sounded genuine. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was harder on Ethan. He kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Eventually, he stopped asking. Marcus looked at his sleeping son. I just wanted to give him a normal life, you know, just the two of us figuring it out. And tonight I almost ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything. You saved him. Dr. Morrison stood, preparing to leave. Try to get some sleep, Mr. Chen. He'll need you to be rested tomorrow. Marcus, he said. Call me Marcus. She smiled. Sarah. Now, over the next 2 days, as Ethan recovered and underwent allergy testing, Marcus found himself looking forward to Dr. Morrison's, Sarah's, visits. She had a way of talking to Ethan that made the boy light up, explaining complicated medical concepts in terms a 7-year-old could understand, making him laugh even when he was scared. And when she talked to Marcus, there was an ease between them that he hadn't felt with anyone in years. On the afternoon of Ethan's discharge, Sarah stopped by with the final paperwork and a prescription for an EpiPen. He's cleared to go home, she said. Just follow up with the allergist next week and make sure he avoids all peanuts and tree nuts. We will. Thank you again for everything. Marcus hesitated, then took a chance. Can I buy you a coffee as a thank you? I know you've probably got a million things to do, but I'd like that, Sarah said, and her smile made something warm bloom in Marcus's chest. My shift ends in an hour. There's a cafe across the street. An hour later, they sat across from each other in a quiet corner of the cafe, steam rising from their cups. Ethan colored in a book at a nearby table, content and healthy and alive. Marcus couldn't stop looking at him, reassuring himself that his son was really okay. He's resilient, Sarah said, following his gaze. Kids usually are. He's my whole world, Marcus said. I don't know what I would have done if... He couldn't finish the sentence. But you don't have to think about that. He's fine. Sarah wrapped her hands around her mug. Tell me about him. What's he like when he's not having medical emergencies? Marcus felt himself relax, launching into stories about Ethan. His son's obsession with dinosaurs, how he knew more about paleontology than most adults, the way he insisted on reading the same bedtime story every night, a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, that had been Marcus's own childhood book. How he'd taught himself to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on the piano by ear. He sounds wonderful, Sarah said, and there was a wistfulness in her voice again. What about you? Marcus asked. What's your story? Sarah was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. I grew up in Portland. My parents were both doctors, so I suppose it was inevitable I'd end up in medicine too. Came to Seattle for med school, and just never left. Do you see your parents often? My father passed away 10 years ago. Heart attack. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Marcus could hear the grief underneath. My mother is still in Portland, but we're not very close. She's always been more interested in my career achievements than in me as a person. I'm sorry. That sounds lonely. Sarah looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face. It is, sometimes, but I have my work, and that's fulfilling most of the time. Most of the time. She smiled ruefully. There are moments when I wonder what it would be like to have something else, someone else, But the hours are brutal, and dating as a doctor is nearly impossible. Everyone thinks it's all Grey's Anatomy romance, but the reality is falling asleep during dates because you just worked a 36-hour shift. Marcus laughed. I can't imagine. I work from home as a software engineer, and I still feel like there aren't enough hours in the day. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing effortlessly from one topic to another. Marcus learned that Sarah loved mystery novels, that she was a terrible cook who lived on hospital cafeteria food and takeout, that she'd wanted to be an astronaut when she was a kid. Sarah learned that Marcus played guitar, that he'd once been in a band in college, that his dream was to take Ethan to every continent before he turned 18. It was Ethan who finally interrupted them, tugging on Marcus's sleeve. "Dad, I'm tired. Can we go home?" Marcus checked his watch and was startled to realize how much time had passed. "Of course, buddy." He stood, suddenly awkward. He didn't want this to end. "Sarah, Can I see you again?" Sarah asked, and the vulnerability in her question made his heart skip. Not as Ethan's doctor, just as Sarah. "I'd really like that," Marcus said, feeling like a teenager again. They exchanged numbers, and as Marcus and Ethan left the cafe, the boy looked up at him with knowing eyes. "Dad, do you like Dr. Sarah?" Marcus felt his cheeks heat. "She's very nice, yes. I like her too. She's pretty and she's smart and she made me feel better." Ethan swung their joined hands. "I think she should come over for dinner." "Maybe someday, buddy." "Soon," Ethan said with the confidence of a child who believed he could will things into existence. That someday came sooner than Marcus expected. Sarah texted him that evening, just a simple message asking how Ethan was feeling. That led to another message, and another, and before he knew it, they were texting throughout the day, sharing random thoughts and photos and jokes. A week later, Sarah came over for dinner, takeout from an Italian place because neither of them could cook. Ethan monopolized her attention, showing her his dinosaur collection and explaining the difference between the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods with earnest seriousness. "He's incredible," Sarah told Marcus later, when Ethan had finally gone to bed. They sat on the couch, a respectable distance between them, though Marcus was hyper-aware of every inch. "You're doing an amazing job with him." "I'm just trying not to mess him up too badly," Marcus said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Single parenting is not for the faint of heart. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit." Sarah turned to face him more fully. "He's happy. He's curious, he's kind. That doesn't happen by accident." "I had a good role model," Marcus said. "My parents were amazing, are amazing. They're still together after 40 years, still act like newlyweds half the time." He paused. "What were your parents like?" Sarah's expression shuttered slightly. "Distant, demanding. My father was a cardiac surgeon, my mother is a neurologist. They expected excellence in everything. I was playing piano at 4, speaking 3 languages by 8, skipped 2 grades in school, but I don't remember them ever asking what I wanted." "That sounds suffocating." "It was, but it also made me who I am. I wouldn't be the doctor I am today without that drive." She looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to just be a kid, though. To play and make mistakes and not have every moment scheduled and optimized." Marcus thought about his own childhood, playing in the creek behind his house, the summer days that seemed to stretch on forever. "Where did you grow up exactly?" "Portland, you said." "A suburb called Lake Oswego, very upper middle class, very boring." Sarah smiled. "Though there was this one summer when we rented a cabin at Mount Hood for a month. I think I was 7. It was the closest I ever came to having a real childhood adventure." Something clicked in Marcus's mind, a memory trying to surface. "Mount Hood. Which part?" "Government camp. My parents were working on a research paper together, and they wanted somewhere quiet." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Why? Did you go there as a kid?" Marcus felt his heart rate pick up. "Yeah, actually. My family used to rent a cabin there every summer. We stopped going after I turned 8 because of something that happened. He stood up, suddenly agitated. Sarah, what year were you there? The summer you were 7. 1997. July, I think. Sarah was watching him with concern. Marcus, what's wrong? I was there in July 1997. I was 7. Marcus moved to the bookshelf, pulling down a photo album he hadn't looked at in years. His hands shook as he flipped through pages. There was a girl at the lake. I only saw her once, but I've never forgotten. She fell through the ice. Sarah stood up slowly. What are you talking about? What ice? It was July. There was this old ice house by the lake where they used to store ice before refrigeration. We weren't supposed to go near it, but some of the local kids dared us. There was a girl there, I didn't know her name. She went in first, and the floor gave way. Marcus found the page he was looking for. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. I went in after her, pulled her out before she drowned in the freezing water underneath. He handed the album to Sarah, watching her face as she read the article. Her skin went pale. Local boy saves girl from ice house, the headline read. There was a grainy photo of a young Marcus Chen receiving a medal from the local sheriff. And next to him, wrapped in a blanket, was a young girl with dark hair and a visible cut above her left eyebrow. That's me, Sarah whispered. She touched her own eyebrow where the scar was. I remember. Oh my God, I remember there was a boy. He pulled me out, but I never knew his name. My parents rushed me back to our cabin and we left the next day. They were furious that I'd gone to the ice house. I was grounded for the rest of the summer. She looked up at Marcus, her eyes wide. You saved my life. They stared at each other, the weight of the revelation settling over them like snow. 28 years ago, they had met for a single afternoon, and Marcus had pulled Sarah from freezing water. Now, 28 years later, Sarah had saved Marcus's son from suffocating. 2 lives saved, 2 debts repaid, a circle completed that neither of them had known existed. This is impossible, Sarah said. But she was smiling, tears gathering in her eyes. This can't be coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence anymore, Marcus said, moving closer to her. I think you were meant to be Ethan's doctor. I think we were meant to find each other again. I tried to find you, Sarah said suddenly. After we got home that summer, I tried to convince my parents to let me go back, to let me thank the boy who saved me. But they said it was in the past, that I should focus on moving forward. I never forgot you, though. I've thought about that day so many times over the years. So have I, Marcus admitted. I always wondered what happened to you, if you were okay. He took her hands in his. And now you're here, and you saved my son, and Sarah, I don't think I believe in fate, but this feels like something more than chance. Sarah stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I think you're right. When they kissed, it felt like coming home and discovering something new all at the same time. It felt like the completion of a story that had started 28 years ago on a summer afternoon at Mount Hood. Marcus pulled her closer, and Sarah's arms wrapped around his neck, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. They broke apart eventually, both breathless and smiling. I should probably go, Sarah said reluctantly. I have an early shift tomorrow. You could stay, Marcus offered, then quickly added, on the couch, I mean, or in the guest room. I just meant, Sarah laughed, touching his face gently. I know what you meant, and I'd like that, but let's take this slow. We have time now, all the time in the world. Over the following months, they fell into a rhythm. Sarah started spending more evenings at Marcus's house, becoming a fixture in both his and Ethan's lives. She taught Ethan about the human body, drawing diagrams that made the boy's eyes light up with fascination. Marcus taught Sarah to cook, simple recipes at first. though they often ended up ordering takeout when things went wrong, laughing at the smoke alarm going off for the third time. One evening, about 6 months after that first coffee, Marcus and Sarah sat on his back porch while Ethan played with the neighbor's dog in the yard. The summer sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, her hand finding Marcus's, "about that day at Mount Hood. About how you saved me. You don't have to thank me again. I was just a kid doing what anyone would have done. That's not what I mean." Sarah watched Ethan running across the grass. "I've been thinking about how my whole life led to that moment in the ER. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every time I chose medicine over everything else, it was all leading to being the doctor on duty when Ethan came in. If I'd made different choices, if I'd been a different person, I might not have been there. I might not have been able to save him. You think you became a doctor because I saved you? I think I became a doctor because you showed me that one person can make a difference, that in the worst moment of someone's life, the right person being in the right place can change everything." She turned to look at him. "You gave me my life back that day, and I got to give Ethan his life. And now we're here, and I feel like I'm getting to live a life I never knew I wanted." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I love you. I think I've loved you since I was 7 years old and didn't know what love was." "I love you too," Sarah said. "Both of you." They got married the following spring, a small ceremony at the same lake where they'd first met. Ethan was the ring bearer, beaming with pride in his little suit. Marcus's parents flew in from California, and when they saw the old newspaper clipping that Marcus had framed and placed on the guestbook table, his mother cried. Sarah's mother came too, and though she was stiff and formal at first, Ethan's enthusiasm slowly melted her reserve. By the end of the night, Marcus saw her laughing at something Ethan said, her hand resting gently on her new grandson's head. "Thank you," Sarah's mother said to Marcus later as the party was winding down. "For saving my daughter, twice." "Twice?" Marcus asked, confused. "Once when you were children, and once when you came back into her life. She was so lonely before you. I didn't realize how much until I saw her tonight, how happy she is." The older woman's eyes were damp. "I wasn't a very good mother, too focused on achievement, not enough on love. But maybe I can try to be a better grandmother." "She'd like that," Marcus said gently. "Ethan would too." 5 years later, Marcus stood in the same hospital where he'd first met Sarah as an adult, though this time under much happier circumstances. Sarah lay in a hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink. Ethan, now 12, and already showing signs of the tall teenager he'd become, leaned over carefully to peer at his new sister. "She's so small," he breathed. "Hi, Emma. I'm your big brother." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "She's perfect." "She is," Sarah agreed, looking up at him with tired eyes. "We made a person." "We made a family," Marcus corrected. That night, after visiting hours ended, and Ethan had reluctantly gone home with Marcus's parents, Marcus and Sarah sat together in the quiet hospital room. Emma slept in the bassinet beside them, her tiny fists curled against her face. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Sarah asked, "when I came to check on Ethan?" "I said a lot of things. I was pretty out of my mind with worry." "You said, 'You saved my son.' And I thought at the time that I was just doing my job, being a doctor. But it was so much more than that, wasn't it? Saving Ethan meant saving you, saving all of us." She reached for his hand. "I got my whole life because you pulled me out of that ice house. And now we have this beautiful, impossible family that exists because of one moment of bravery, 28 years ago." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I used to wonder if Jessica leaving was somehow my fault. If I'd failed at being a husband, but if she hadn't left, if things had been different, I wouldn't have been in that ER on that specific night. I wouldn't have met you again. Ethan wouldn't have Emma. Every hard thing we went through was leading us here. To this moment, Sarah agreed. Emma stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. They both immediately turned to her, new parents attuned to their daughter's slightest movement. She settled again, and they relaxed. "I have something for you," Marcus said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait, but this feels like the right moment." Sarah opened the box to find a locket. Inside were 3 photos. 7-year-old Marcus and Sarah from that newspaper clipping, a photo from their wedding day, and a picture they'd taken just a week ago, all 4 of them together. Past, present, and future. "So you never forget where we started," Marcus said, "and so you always remember where we're going." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I could never forget. Every day with you and Ethan, now Emma, it's like living in a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, the city lights of Seattle twinkling through the hospital window. In the distance, a siren wailed, another emergency, another life hanging in the balance, another moment where everything could change. But in this room, in this moment, everything was perfect, a family formed by chance, by choice, by a child's bravery and a woman's skill, a circle completed, a debt paid, a love found twice in one lifetime. The next morning, when the sun streamed through the hospital window and painted Emma's bassinet in gold, Ethan arrived with Marcus's parents, bursting with energy and questions. Sarah's mother arrived shortly after, carrying a handmade baby blanket, her eyes soft in a way Marcus had never seen before. The older woman approached the bassinet slowly, reverently, and when she looked down at Emma, tears slipped down her cheeks. "May I hold her?" she asked Sarah, her voice trembling. "Of course, Mom," Sarah said gently. As her mother cradled Emma, something shifted in the room. The walls that had stood between Sarah and her mother for so many years seemed to crumble. "I'm sorry," the older woman whispered, not looking up from her granddaughter's face. "I'm sorry I was so cold with you, Sarah. I was so focused on making you successful that I forgot to just love you. I don't want to make the same mistake with Emma or with Ethan." Sarah reached out and took her mother's hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." Marcus watched the scene unfold, his heart full. This was what family was supposed to be, people choosing each other, forgiveness replacing old wounds, love growing in unexpected places. He thought about his own parents, who had loved him unconditionally, who had shown him what a good marriage looked like. He thought about Jessica, and for the first time in years, he felt no anger or resentment, only gratitude that her leaving had led him to this moment. "Dad," Ethan tugged on his sleeve, "can I tell Emma about dinosaurs?" Marcus laughed. "She's only 1 day old, buddy. I think dinosaurs might be a bit advanced." "But I have to start her education early," Ethan said seriously, and everyone in the room laughed. The boy's earnestness, his pure joy at being a big brother, was infectious. As the morning progressed, the room filled with warmth and laughter. Marcus's mother fussed over Sarah, bringing her food from the cafeteria and fluffing her pillows. Marcus's father entertained Ethan with stories from Marcus's own childhood, tales of scraped knees and tree forts and summers that lasted forever. Sarah's mother held Emma for nearly an hour, singing soft lullabies in a voice Sarah had never heard before, tender and sweet. "This is nice," Sarah said to Marcus, during a quiet moment when the others were gathered around Emma's bassinet, cooing and taking photos. "Having everyone here, having a real family." "It's everything," Marcus agreed, kissing her temple. "It's everything I didn't know I needed." That afternoon, after the visitors had left and Emma was nursing contentedly, Sarah looked at Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "I want to tell you something. About that day at the ice house. Marcus settled into the chair beside her bed, giving her his full attention. After you pulled me out, after my parents rushed me away, I had nightmares for months. I kept dreaming I was falling through the ice, and no one came. In the dreams, I was alone in the dark water and I drowned. Sarah's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the echo of that childhood fear. But then, when I was in medical school, during my darkest moments, when I wondered if I could handle the pressure, I started having a different dream. I dreamed about a boy pulling me out of the water, saving me. I didn't remember it was a real memory at first. I thought it was just my mind's way of coping. Sarah, Marcus started, but she shook her head. Let me finish. When I saw that newspaper clipping, when I realized it wasn't just a dream, that you were real and that you'd actually saved me, everything made sense. Every choice I'd made, every sacrifice, it all led back to that moment. You gave me my life, and I spent my whole career trying to do the same for others. She looked down at Emma. And now we have this beautiful, impossible life. Marcus knelt beside the bed, taking both her hands in his. I need you to know something too. After I pulled you out of the water, after the paramedics came and took you away, I kept that newspaper clipping. I carried it in my wallet for years. I didn't really understand why. I just knew that day mattered, that you mattered, even though I didn't know your name. He smiled, shaking his head at the memory. My mum found the clipping when I was in college and asked me about it. I told her about the girl I'd saved, and you know what she said? She said, maybe someday you'll meet her again. I thought she was being sentimental, but she was right. Mothers usually are, Sarah said with a soft laugh. They spent the rest of the day in that hospital room, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for their future. They talked about Emma's first birthday, about the trip they'd take to Mount Hood when she was old enough, about showing both children the ice house where their story really began. They talked about Ethan starting middle school, about Sarah maybe reducing her hours at the hospital to spend more time at home, about Marcus's dream of writing a novel. What would you write about? Sarah asked, intrigued. Us, Marcus said simply. But no one would believe it. It's too perfect, too impossibly coincidental. Then write it as fiction. Change the names, change the details, but keep the heart of it. The story of two people who saved each other as children and found each other again as adults. Sarah shifted Emma to her other arm. Call it, You Saved My Son. Marcus considered it. That's actually perfect. As the sun began to set on their first full day as a family of 4, casting long shadows across the hospital room, Marcus thought about all the moments that had led them here, the terrifying rush to the emergency room with Ethan in his arms, the calm, steady presence of Dr. Sarah Morrison, the coffee shop conversation that had turned into something more, the moment they'd realized their shared past, every argument they'd had and made up from, every dinner together, every time Sarah had stayed late at the hospital and come home exhausted but smiling because she'd saved another life. Every morning Ethan had climbed into bed between them, and every night they'd read him stories until he fell asleep. All of it had been building to this. To Emma, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. To Ethan, excited to be a big brother. To two families, once fractured and incomplete, now woven together into something stronger than either could have been alone. Marcus! Sarah's voice pulled him from his thoughts. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking that I was 7 years old when I decided to follow some kids into an ice house, even though I was scared. And that one decision, that one moment of being braver than I felt, gave me everything. It gave me you, and Ethan, and Emma, and this life. He moved to sit beside her on the bed, careful not to jostle Emma. I'm thinking that every scar, every hard moment, every time I thought I couldn't keep going as a single parent, it was all worth it. Because it led me back to you. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that as the room grew darker and the city lights began to twinkle outside. Emma slept, oblivious to the love surrounding her, to the incredible story of her parents' reunion, to the fact that she existed because a 7-year-old boy had been brave enough to jump into freezing water. "You saved my son," Marcus had said to Sarah that first night, his voice breaking with gratitude and relief. But the truth was deeper, more intricate, more beautiful than a simple exchange of debts. They had saved each other, yes, but they'd also saved themselves. Sarah had learned that there was more to life than medicine, that love and family were worth the risk of opening her heart. Marcus had learned that losing one love didn't mean he'd never find another, that the universe sometimes gave second chances in the most unexpected ways. Ethan had learned that families could grow and change, and that the people who loved you would always be there when you needed them most. And Emma, when she was old enough to understand, would learn the story of how her parents met twice, once as children at a lake and once as adults in a hospital, and how sometimes the most important moments of your life happen when you're too young to remember them. In the quiet of that hospital room, with their children safe and their love certain, Marcus and Sarah held each other close and marveled at the impossible, beautiful truth that had brought them together. Some people are meant to find each other, and some people are meant to save each other over and over again until they finally understand that they were never really separate at all. They were two halves of the same story, written across decades, waiting for the moment when the pieces would finally fit together. "I love you," Sarah whispered, her head on Marcus's shoulder, Emma sleeping peacefully between them. "I love you too," he answered. "I always have. I always will." And outside, Seattle hummed with life, with emergencies and celebrations, with endings and beginnings, with people finding each other and losing each other in the endless dance of human connection. But in room 412, a family rested together, complete at last, their story finally whole, a circle completed, a promise kept, a love that had waited 28 years to bloom fully, and it was perfect. It was everything. It was home. Thanks for watching this incredible story. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Here at Heartfelt Storytime, you have new beautiful stories every day. Don't miss out. See you next time.